I wouldn't exactly call myself a lifelong Doctor Who fan because obviously I live across the pond in America where it's all about Star Wars, Star Trek, Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, other sci fi. But over the past decade, I would say that Doctor Who has gained a foothold in North America when it comes to a fan base. A lot of that can be credited to Russell T Davies as well as Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant, Matt Smith, along with Stephen Moffat. Great stories, great characters, and awesome companions really brought me on board with the Christmas Vacation. That was the very first Doctor Who episode I watched on the Sci-Fi Channel before they moved it over to BBC America so it would actually air without a delay. But that's when I first was introduced to Doctor Who about over a decade ago, and I was hooked. I was like, wow, this seems like a really cool show. I mean, I like this character who's playing this one alien dude that likes to travel in this strange-looking blue box, and this little blonde companion. She seems kind of cool. She has a personality. She's got something going on with herself, and they have character. They have this chemistry, and there was just something about that season, the first season with David Tennant, compelled me to want to go back and watch the prior season with Chris Eccleston, which was the first season of the new Doctor Who. And I went back and I watched that. I got to learn more about Rose, about her mom, about Mickey, and about the Doctor. And then I also started going back and watching classic Doctor Who's. In fact, I ended up becoming I guess a purchaser of Doctor Who DVDs. My favorite classic Doctor Who, I would have to say, is Jon Pertwee, because I think that was the very first classic Doctor Who DVD set I bought, or episode arc. And then I just developed an addiction. I just kept buying them because I got into it. I really did. And then I went from like Jon Pertwee to watching Tom Baker, and then going and getting some of the black and white eras, from William Hartnell, the original Doctor, as well as Patrick Troughton. The funny thing is, the very first thing I ever saw Patrick Troughton in was The Omen with Gregory Peck, and he played the father. So that's what I knew Patrick Troughton from, not from Doctor Who, but from The Omen. Funny story. And then I also got into the 80s Doctors, which you could start to see the show was going downhill, by the time they got to the end with Sylvester McCoy. And I even ended up getting the 90s movie, and it was okay. It wasn't perfect. So yeah, I've kind of dove into the Doctor Who fandom over the past decade. And every time there was a new season, whether it was David Tennant or eventually Matt Smith, I loved it. I was always watching every new episode, every new season. And whenever Peter Capaldi took over, he was okay. I felt like eventually they started really doing a better job with his version of the Doctor. And I did like Clara at first under Matt Smith. Yeah, Matt Smith. But I feel like Clara probably overstayed her welcome. And as a companion, she probably should have left the show sooner than she did, because a lot of people started to grow to dislike Clara. I don't blame the actress for it. I just think that maybe she was just a little too popular, and they may have just kept her around a little too long. But overall, I did like Clara for the most part, along with Amy and Rory and Martha and a few other companions too, including Captain Jack. And I also love Torchwood. Not that last season, that was weird, but still better than what we've gotten so far in the Chib Jodie era of Doctor Who. And Series 12 just wrapped up last night. And I was going to do this video Sunday night, but I didn't feel like it. I actually went back and forth about whether or not I wanted to actually do a review. But I said, you know what, fine. Let's just get it over with. My thoughts, my views, and opinions regarding Series 12 of Doctor Who. And I just want to say this for the record. I was not one of those Doctor Who fans that was against the idea of a female doctor, because the Time Lords are an alien species, right? They regenerate. They change their entire form. And yeah, up to Peter Capaldi's Doctor, the Doctor had always been male until that got retconned. But it was established throughout the Stephen Moffat era and the Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi eras of Doctor Who that There were Time Lords that did change genders upon regeneration, like the Corsair, the General, as well as when the Master became Missy. So it was at least established, and there was always the possibility that eventually the Doctor could become a female version of the Doctor, which I did not have a problem with as long as they casted the right actress for the job. But unfortunately, we ended up getting Jodie Whittaker. Now, I liked Jodie Whittaker in Broadchurch. I'm not completely familiar with some of her other works, and that was one of the reasons why I initially supported Chris Chibnall as the showrunner, because I thought he did a good job with Broadchurch for the most part. I enjoyed that show with David Tennant and Coleman and some others, including Arthur, who also played Rory. It was a good show. I haven't watched the last season yet. I watched the first two. Second season had some good moments to it, but overall not bad. So I thought that at the very least we would get a good passing of the torch from Stephen Moffat to Chibnall, and hopefully Jodie would do a good job. So I was at the very least optimistic that she would be a decent Doctor. Maybe not the best Doctor, but good enough to, get enough of the fans on board to keep the series going, and maybe eventually a lot of us would grow to like her as the Doctor. But unfortunately, after 2 seasons of enduring Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, I don't like her. I think she's probably one of the worst Doctors we've had, and I hate to say that, and it has nothing to do with her being a female. I think that there were better actresses out there, like Hayley Atwell, who wanted to be the Doctor, by the way. She went out there on several occasions, talking about how she wanted to be the Doctor because she loves Doctor Who. I think Hayley Atwell would have been a great first female Doctor, and maybe she'll be a future Doctor. So I'm not against them trying again somewhere down the road with a future female Doctor, but they have to cast the Doctor correctly. And I think in hindsight, unfortunately, Jodie Whittaker was a bad choice. I realize that there are Jodie fans out there that love her, that have loved the 11th and 12th season. We all have a right to our tastes. I'm not out to cancel anybody, but we all have different opinions about it. I just, as a Doctor Who fan, that's been one for over the past decade, since David Tennant and Matt Smith, and even to some degree Peter Capaldi, and going back and watching a lot of the classics, I just have not enjoyed these past 2 seasons of Doctor Who. But I'll real quickly go over the pros and then the cons of Series 12, because I do have a few pros. I always try to be somewhat down the middle. I would say one of the pros was Sasha. I thought he did a really good job as the Master. For the most part, I think Chibnall could have done a better job with him, but I think he's a great actor, and I think he did a good job as the Master. So I'll give a pro to Sasha as the Master. Jo Martin. Oh, by the way, there are spoilers. I guess I should have mentioned that at first, so I can't go back in time. I don't have a TARDIS except for the one on my t-shirt and say that, but hopefully most of you coming in already had a feeling that there were going to be spoilers, and B, you just don't care to be spoiled anymore. But anyways, Jo Martin, which was revealed to be another Doctor. We don't know exactly where she lines up. Now, does she exist somewhere between William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton, or Patrick Troughton and John Pertwee's Doctors? And are she just one of these mystery Doctors? I don't know. But in the very short amount of time we got with Jo Martin as the Doctor, and both episodes with The Fugitive of the Judoon and The Timeless Children, I liked her. I honestly do like her. I think it's sad because in the short amount of time she got as the Doctor, I think she turned out to be a better Doctor than Jodie's Doctor, and it really makes me wish that we could just have her as our Doctor going into Series 13. I wish that Jodie would just regenerate into her. I don't know. There's some speculation that maybe Jo Martin's Doctor is actually the 14th Doctor. I don't know if that's true or not. Once again, it's rumor mill. We have no idea. But I thought she did a good job as the Doctor for the short amount of time that we got with her, Roof Doctor, whatever you wish to call her. And then her TARDIS interior definitely looked way better than Jodie's TARDIS interior. And that interior is probably the worst TARDIS interior of all the TARDIS interiors, in my opinion. I've seen a few of them. And even in the 80s, I think the 80s TARDIS interior was way better than what Jodie has. And it's crap. I hate it. All right, so now that Season 12 is over, let's talk about the cons. Chibnall, Jodie. Two major cons. I would like to see them both leave the show, but unfortunately, we are going to get a 13th series with both of them. Chibs is the showrunner, Jodie is the doctor. Maybe by the end of the 13th series, Jodie will bow out and she'll regenerate, and maybe with the terrible ratings that Doctor Who now has, because the ratings are at record low levels, maybe the BBC will finally have enough and kick him out the door. Of course, probably not, because there's a lot of people in the BBC that are defending him right now that share the same points of view. The fam, I'll talk more about the fam in a moment, but I already mentioned the fugly TARDIS interior. I wish they would have did something about that in between series 11 and 12. By the way, series in the UK is seasons in the US. It's kind of one and the same. The music has gotten way worse. Murray Gold was a great composer throughout the new Doctor Who era, from RTD to the Moffat era, from Eccleston, David Tennant, Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi. He did great music. Loved his music, including like the Time Lord music, the Master music, the various different versions of the Doctor, from David Tennant's Doctor, Bad Wolf, Rose Tyler, as well as Matt Smith. He just a musical mastermind. I hope he's out there making some great music for other TV shows or movies. But it was unfortunate that the music has suffered because of his departure. The writing is bad, like from what I gather from Nerdrotic and other content creators out there. The writers are not very good. They don't seem to be very passionate or very experienced when it comes to sci-fi. And a lot of them, like I mentioned, Nerdrotic, Critical Drinker, Bolstrek, a few others as well, have pointed that out, that these are not exactly the types of writers you'd want writing Doctor Who, because they clearly aren't very good at sci-fi. And it does seem like that they're stealing a lot from the David Tennant, Matt Smith era. And I noticed that quite a few times, like with the Judoon episode, they were using some similarities to what was the episode where they were on the moon, and the Judoon would destroy something at the hospital on the moon whenever the hospital was teleported to the moon, because there was a fugitive in the hospital, and Martha was an intern doctor. I liked Martha, by the way, as a companion. And they destroyed something, and then they did this whole compensation. They did the same thing in Judoon, and then they went fugitive of the Judoon in Series 12. So there's been a lot of, I guess, homages or outright theft from the Chibnall era Doctor Who all the way back to the RTD Moffat era Doctor Who's. So that just shows the lack of imagination. Unable to even come up with original stuff, they just go and watch previous episodes from David Tennant and Matt Smith's stories, and they just steal from them. Brilliant. Awesome. I mean, at the very least, if you're going to steal from Doctor Who, go back to the classics, steal from the John Pertwee era or the Tom Baker era, or, the Patrick Troughton or William Hartnell eras, or even in the 80s, At least that's far enough back where maybe most of the fans wouldn't notice it as easily as we do now. But anyway, so let's get into spoilers. We are spoiling it, by the way. The fam, I want to talk about the family. So Jodie, she just doesn't do it for me as the Doctor. I wanted her to be a good Doctor, and maybe she's overall a decent actress. I haven't seen her in anything else besides Broadchurch, and after this I really don't care to. But there's just been moments when she just doesn't win me over as the Doctor the same way David Tennant or Matt Smith or even Peter Capaldi did, because at least Peter Capaldi is a hardcore Doctor Who fan, and that was like the role of a lifetime for him whenever he finally was cast as the Doctor. But she just doesn't do it. And it reminds me of a scene during one of the episodes where Graham, who is one of the three members of the fam, one of the three companions, is a cancer survivor. And he was having this heartfelt conversation with Jodie Whittaker's Doctor in the TARDIS, inside the fugly TARDIS. And he was talking about his fears of the cancer returning. And if this was, Christopher Eccleston or David Tennant, Matt Smith, or Peter Capaldi, you would have seen some sort of emotion from those, versions of the Doctor, or maybe like from John Pertwee or Tom Baker or some of the other Doctors, where they would sit there and they would listen kindly, and then they would throw out some sage wisdom, some advice, something to reassure your companion that like with Joe Grant, there were times when Joe Grant would confide in Jon Pertwee's doctor, and he always reassured her. He always told this interesting story back on Gallifrey, and it tied into whatever issue she was having. He didn't have this "I don't give a shit" look on his face. I've never really seen that, even with Colin Baker's doctor. Even though he came across sometimes as a little cross, he did generally, at the end of the day, care for Perry, and he did seem to be the doctor, just a little different, and that's okay with the doctors. It's okay for them to be a little different, but in the end of the day, it's still the doctor. But after Graham gave that heartfelt speech to her, Jodie just had this "I don't give a shit" look on her face. Like, she's like, I don't care. And to make matters worse, she didn't even have anything interesting to say to at least reassure Graham. It was like, I don't know. She said, I'm not very good with people, or blah, blah, blah. It was just stupid. And if I had something to say, I guess I'll think about it. But yeah, I mean, this is one of many examples of Jodie's doctor just failing miserably. And I don't know if we blame Jodie Whittaker for that, or we blame Chris Chibnall. I would blame both, or even the writers to some degree, because they should have had something in that moment to at least like show us that Jodie's doctor does give a damn about Graham, when a lot of times it seems like she doesn't. And what's the point of the fam anyways? I mean, you have Yaz there, all stunning and brave. And look, I don't have a problem with Yaz or Ryan, and I wanted to like them all as companions. But I feel like where previous Doctor Who's succeeded, like with the first set of companions during the William Hartnell era, as well as Peter Davison, whenever he had several companions, Jodie Whittaker's Doctor fails. And that's a lot to do with Chris Chibnall and the writers. They just don't properly flesh out the companions. And I think that all of them needed to be fleshed out better, like Graham, Yaz, Ryan. And I think there's just, in this day and age, I think 3 is too many. I mean, they did a good job with Rory and Amy during the Matt Smith era. It worked because they became something special. And we got a little bit of time with Amy before, Rory officially came on board. But at the same time, we were learning a little bit more about Rory, and they were able to flesh out both of these two characters and why those two love each other and why they were together despite both of them having their own flaws and shortcomings when it came to Amy and Rory, and how Matt Smith's doctor grew to at first care about the girl who waited, Amy, played by the awesome Karen Gillian, and I hope she continues to be a success in future movies. And then Arthur's a great actor too, and they just worked together, those 3. And even in the worst episodes, they were better than what we've seen in Jodie's Doctor Who era. So I feel like that they should have just went with one companion. I guess Chibnall was going for the check boxes, but he should have picked one. I would have picked Ryan. If I was Chibnall, I would have picked Ryan, and this is why. Because you have the first female companion, you might as well line her up with the male character, right? So he's young, he's got a lot of flaws in him. We could see him grow as a character from, the beginning of Series 11, just losing his grandma. And maybe he comes back to console Graham. And Yaz, maybe she, jumps in and out. At first, I thought they were going to make Yaz and Ryan romantic, throughout Series 11. It seemed to imply that there was something that was going to happen there. But I guess they threw that out the window because in Series 12, you had Yaz's hotter younger sister trying to get with Ryan. And hey, Ryan, I would go with that instead. But anyways, yeah, I mean, I feel like they should have just picked one companion or at least did some rotating, where maybe there were times when Ryan couldn't go with a doctor on an adventure. Then, okay, Yaz would go over in an episode, so they would have more time with Yaz and the doctor. Or maybe there would be times when Graham would go, and maybe there were times when Graham couldn't go because he had to go do this or do that. Or maybe while Yaz was actually policing, because she's supposed to be a cop, but she doesn't ever show up for work. So maybe there are times when she's having to work a shift or work several shifts, and she can't go with a doctor on an adventure, so, the doctor grabs Ryan and grabs Graham, or one of them, and they go off, and they're able to spend some time together. And I think that was one way that Series 11 kind of failed. They didn't really flesh out those characters too well, because you had to cram all 4 of them together from start to finish, from Series 11 into Series 12. I mean, we learn a little bit about them, but, there's an episode where Yaz is wanting to run away, but the only reason why she doesn't run away is because a cop talks her out of it. but we never learn why she was wanting to run away. They just leave it open to interpretation. I don't get it. I mean, she's hot, she's smart. Like, why was she bullied? They could have done a better job there explaining why she wanted to run away. I mean, her family obviously loved her and cared about her. But, there was just one of many instances where I feel like the writing failed the companions. And I don't blame the actors. I know some people have been demonizing the actors, but I think they were doing the best with the material they had to work with. Well, at least the companion actors. And like I mentioned earlier, I thought Sasha did a really good job with the Master. I just feel like Jodie has done a bad job with the Doctor. And yeah, so I feel like the fam could have been limited to maybe one companion or rotating companions. Or every now and then you bring Graham in. They did something similar in the David Tennant and let's see, I think Mickey even jumped on a few times with Rose. So a few times we saw Mickey go along in the TARDIS with Rose and the Ninth Doctor, as well as the 10th Doctor, if I remember correctly, and including Rose's mom. But you don't want to do it every single episode. I mean, eventually it became like that with Matt Smith and his Doctor, along with Rory and Amy. But at first we got a lot more time with Amy, and then eventually they started bringing Rory along a little bit more, and by then most of the fans were okay with it. They're like, yeah, okay, we've gotten used to Rory. We've grown to like him as a character. We've had some time with him here and there. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just one of many issues I have. But then it went worse from there. So that's like small potatoes with what I had issue-wise with this season finale or series finale. I wish it was a series finale, as in the end of this franchise for now, similar to the end of the Sylvester McCoy era. I think it needs to be put on a hiatus for a while and then brought back eventually, maybe in a decade from now. But let's talk about the Timeless Children and all the fun canon breaking. And by the way, your thoughts, your views, and opinions about Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, the Chris Chibnall era, The Fam, and the episodes of Series 12 are welcome below in the comment section. And even if you disagree with me, as long as you're civil about it, you can have your opinion. You have a right to your opinion. Even if you love Jodie and The Fam, that's perfectly fine. But let's all try to be civil to each other. Let's not be toxic like those on Twitter. So my issue from not watching every single Doctor Who ever, because I think that would be almost impossible, especially since a lot of them have been lost, but I have watched quite a few. I feel like Chibnall hurt the Doctor Who franchise. Now, unfortunately, I looked on Twitter, and I really shouldn't use Twitter as a good example. There's a lot of fans out there that felt like it was brilliant, it was awesome, it was great, that Chris Chibnall actually brought things into the canon, like the Mobius Doctors and some other things as well, and he didn't break the canon, but I disagree. I don't have a problem with some things that were done, but there were things that I took serious issue with, and I would say like the origin of the Time Lords, the quote-unquote timeless child, I had a problem with. I don't like the idea of them elevating the Doctor to that level. And I don't like what they did with the Time Lords, because I feel like there's enough information, if you were to put it together from classic to new Doctor Who, where you could feel like there's a rough outline of the Doctor Time Lord species, of the species that the Doctor belongs to. And it had something to do with, them being around for billions of years. The time vortex is what helped establish their ability to regenerate, and how they became the keepers of time. They preserved time, and they stood back, sworn never to interfere unless something came up like the Daleks or the Cybermen or something like that. And eventually, the Doctor, the first Doctor, played by William Hartnell, as a grandfather, decided that he wanted to go explore the universe. So he took a Type 40 TARDIS, he took his granddaughter, and went off on adventures, like a madman in the box, just out trying to make a difference, but at the same time knowing that there were just some aspects of history that could not be changed, not one line, but other things that could be, like fighting the Daleks, along with Davros or the Cybermen, or a few other villains that have come up here and there. But I just don't like it. I don't like this whole thing about I don't know what they originally were called, what the Shibogans. I only watched the episode once. I don't really want to go watch it again. They were called the Shibogans, I guess. and there was like this bestest female scientist ever, and she was a great inventor, and she invented space travel on Gallifrey, and she goes from, just inventing it herself, no help, I guess, to going out into the stars. I mean, where's the whole, having a NASA program, launching rockets into the orbit of Gallifrey, satellites and space stations, and then slowly but surely developing, the ability to travel faster than the speed of light. No, she just does it all. And then she comes across this, this portal where there's this young little child, this young girl, and she decides to adopt her because she's abandoned. And then she's studying her because she's just curious about her. She brings her back to Gallifrey. The little girl ends up fighting over a toy with another Gallifreyan boy or Shibogan boy or whatever they're called. I thought they were all called Gallifreyans, and like the select few, they got to be Time Lords or Time Lords, but that's canon for you. It could have been like the Master. I think it was implied that the boy was a younger version of the Master. Even though during the Peter Capaldi era, there was an episode where Clara actually meets a younger version of the Doctor when he's a boy in a barn, and he's all scared and stuff. But I guess that doesn't count either, so it's very interesting. But anyways, the Timeless Child and the boy are fighting over this toy. She gets pushed off a cliff, and why are two kids playing near a cliff? That's great. Fantastic parenting right there. And instead of dying, she regenerates into another little girl, and then all of a sudden, the bestest scientists ever that invented space travel on Gallifrey started experimenting on the little girl. And I don't know if it's implied that she was actually killing the little girl, or was the little girl regenerating? I'm guessing that she was killing her because, the scientist, I forgot what her name was, who cares? She was slowly getting older and older. But there were several variations of the Timeless Child, and she would just keep regenerating. Until eventually, the scientist cracked the code, and then she injected herself, and then she was able to regenerate her form as well. And that's how the Gallifreyans, or the Shibogans, whatever, were able to become Time Lords because of the Timeless Child, which eventually becomes the Doctor. I feel like it's a major breaking of canon, and I didn't really care for it. But at the same time, I really haven't cared for the past 2 seasons of Doctor Who either. And, I mean, it's possible that in the end it could be written in the future where it was just a trick by the Master, because all this was brought up by the Master, by the way, at the beginning of the season when the Master was revealed to be Sasha's character. And once again, he's one of the few pros. And he goes and he destroys Gallifrey and the Time Lords. So everything that happened in the 50th anniversary Day of the Doctor, which was awesome, by the way, where, the 10th Doctor, the 11th Doctor, the War Doctor, Clara, they worked together to bring back Gallifrey, to save the Time Lords and the Gallifreyans from being wiped out at the end of the Time War. All that's undone. All of it's undone. All the Time Lords, all the Gallifreyans are dead. Somehow they were murdered by the Master. We don't know how he killed them all, because, there are probably quite a few. And the Time Lords, by the end of the Time War, were militarized, if some of you recall, from, the end of the David Tennant era, whenever the Master returned, played by John Sim. I loved his version of the Master, along with Missy, but, with Rassilon, played by Timothy Dalton. I wish we would have had more time with him as Rassilon, a.k.a. the President. You could see how militarized they had become. And how could the Master take them all out? I don't know. There's a lot of things that happen that they never explain. But when it comes to breaking the canon of Doctor Who and retconning shit, okay, they'll explain that away and try and make it work. But honestly, I don't think it worked. I think that it did more harm than good. So in the end, I mean, you could in the future retcon that to where it was simply a trick by the Master to make the Doctor believe Gallifrey was wiped out, to make the Doctor believe the bullshit in the quote-unquote Matrix. It could have all just been put in there by the Master as an invention, a lie, to try to mentally break the Doctor somewhere down the road. And it's sad because after Day of the Doctor, I really wanted the Time Lords to come back. I really wanted the Doctor to eventually save his people. I really did. And I thought that was the direction the show was going. Well, that seemed to be. But sadly, thanks to Chibnall, that's not the case. And I don't know, because you dealt with this heartache, from, the Ninth Doctor to David Tennant's Doctor to even Matt Smith's Doctor, of the fact that this pain, this terrible, huge loss that the Doctor was having to endure, being the last of the Time Lords. And when he found out that the Master survived as well, he spent a lot of time trying to convince the Master to put aside his evil ways because, hey, we're the last of the Time Lords. And when he lost the Master, it was heartbreaking for him. Because then he truly was the last of the Time Lords at that point. And when they brought back the Time Lords, I don't know, I just felt like I wanted more out of that story arc. Even like Capaldi, whenever he went back to Gallifrey, I wasn't entirely happy about the way that played out. But I felt like that it was still left to where a future Doctor could eventually figure out a way to restore the Time Lords and officially, save Gallifrey and put it somewhere where the Gallifreyans and the Time Lords could exist. But I guess that's over for now. And there was no mention of a lot of things from the Time Lord era or the Doctor Who era up to this point, like Rassilon, for example. He was never mentioned. Omega was never mentioned. Romana, or even the Doctor's granddaughter. He was a father and a granddaughter after all. And Susan. No mention of Susan. No, they're all dead, I guess. C'est la vie. But yeah, I did not like The Timeless Children. It may have had its moments, and I feel like there have been a few times throughout the series 11 and 12 that had little moments here and there, but I can't honestly say that there was one episode of the Chibnall, Jodie, Doctor Who era that I have liked, that I generally liked. I haven't. It's all been, meh. It's all been preachy, talking down to us, virtue signaling, and Doctor Who has always been about bringing people together. It didn't need to be this. It did not. The Doctor was always ahead of his time. He's from a different world. He saw us in a different way than we saw each other. He saw our potential. He also saw our flaws, us being humans. But it feels like the Doctor in name only. And like I said earlier, I wanted to give Jodie a chance. I wanted to give Chris Chibnall a chance. But I think after 2 seasons or 2 series or whatever, I'm done. I'm officially done. I'm not even mad about it. I mean, I know there's a lot of more hardcore Doctor Who fans out there than me that are really angry right now, but I'm not even mad anymore because so many shows, TV and movies have been wrecked right now. Star Wars got wrecked. I know they're trying to save it. Once Kathleen Kennedy's gone, there's a hope. I feel like I'm watching the Picard right now, and it's had some moments. At least Picard's had a few moments that I've enjoyed, but it's the same issue because, a lot of that is under Secret Hideout, which is under Bad Robot, and under Alex Kurtzman. We'll talk more about that little teaser once the full season of Picard is complete. Then I'll do a full review on that and share more of my thoughts for any of you interested. But going back to Doctor Who, it is a shame that a show that was about bringing people together has become so divisive. And it didn't have to be this way. And at the heart of it, I blame Chris Chibnall. I blame the mostly terrible writing, except for a few moments here and there. I blame the miscast. Jodie Whittaker was not right for the Doctor. They should have got somebody else like Hayley Atwell, or there's probably a few other female actresses out there that were more than capable of being a convincing Doctor. And a lot of times it felt like Jodie and Chibnall and the writers, especially during Series 11, conveniently forgot about, the rest of the history, the rest of the lore of the Doctor Who verse. And it all should always connect together, where you always feel like that the Doctor is more than meets the eye. Even with, like, Matt Smith, he's brilliant. There's just something about Matt Smith. I think he's been the youngest Doctor, but the way he portrayed the Doctor, the quirkiness, the smarts, the brilliance, and the fact that it felt like that there was an old soul behind that young face. And he managed to do that very quickly, just like David Tennant. And, eventually you grew to like Peter Capaldi. But Jodie, I'm ready for her to go. I'm ready for her to regenerate. I'm ready for the fam to move on to their lives. Yaz being awesome. Ryan hanging out with his friends, maybe hooking up with Yaz's younger sister. Go, Ryan. You do that. Graham maybe meeting, hooking up with that older lady that survived, one of the few survivors left from the cyber war. That was stupid too. Also canon breaking, by the way, but I guess there's no humans left in the future, even though that's not supposed to be the case. If you go by episodes of Doctor Who during the Tennant era, especially with him and the Master arc. But yeah, overall, very disappointed in Series 12. I want Jodie to go away. I would be happy if Jo Martin came in and took over. And if she gets killed off in the Revolution of the Daleks Christmas episode. I think it's going to be on Christmas Day. And maybe she regenerates then, and probably not. But if it becomes Jo Martin as the Doctor and we have her better interior TARDIS, fine. And then team up Jo Martin's Doctor with one companion. That's the best formula, I think, for the Doctor. Sometimes it works. Most of the time, it's better just to have the Doctor and the companion instead of the fan. And then go forward into Series 13. But, yeah, I'm just frustrated with it. And honestly, I only did this video because at the end of the day, I felt like I had to throw my 2 cents out there for whatever that's worth. And I don't know if any of you that are my viewers care for Doctor Who like I did. And for any of you that actually watched Series 11 or 12 of Doctor Who, what were your honest opinions about it regarding Jodie as the Doctor, the fam, Chris Chibnall being the showrunner? And to be honest, I shouldn't have given him a chance anyways, because if you go back to episodes before he took over, episodes that he wrote were honestly not that good. But, it is what it is. So I'm not going to ask to cancel Chris Chibnall or Jodie, but I think with the terrible ratings, the fact that the show is getting better, the numbers speak for themselves. I mean, everyone on Twitter that loved Jodie, fine. If you loved it, that's great. Good for you. We're all entitled to our opinions, and that's the way it should be. We shouldn't cancel each other because of our opinions. These are just my opinions. But as a Doctor Who fan who was willing to give a female doctor the chance, and I still am willing to, if it regenerates into Jo Martin, fine. I'll give her a chance, because I thought in the short time we got with her, I thought she did a good job. But at the same time, that's another issue. If she predates William Hartnell's Doctor, it doesn't make sense, because it was in Unearthly Child when the TARDIS's chameleon circuit broke and forever resembled a police box, except for I think once or twice, maybe during Colin Baker, he fixed it briefly, but I think that they quickly changed it back because by then the TARDIS had become so iconic, looking like a old blue police call box from the UK. There's no point in changing it. And like 2 or 3 TARDISes have come and gone in Series 2. Like there was one earlier that the Master had that Jodie commandeered, and we never find out what happens with that TARDIS. And then they commandeer another TARDIS in Gallifrey in order to escape, which I understand because there would be TARDISes down there. And she just leaves the TARDIS somewhere. Is that what she does? She just parks these TARDISes in random spots and turns them into trees and whatnot. I guess it's kind of a good thing. She can know where to go find a spare TARDIS if she needs one. I guess that kind of works. I don't know. But I still don't know what happened to the Master's house TARDIS at the beginning of the series. I guess it's one of those many, many questions we'll never get answered, most likely. But yeah, I really don't have any interest in Series 13 of the Doctor unless there's some major changes. And from what I've heard from Neurotic and many others out there that do great content, check out their channels, it seems like we're going to probably get more of the same going into Series 13 of the Doctor. But the numbers are not good for Doctor Who. The numbers are going down. And you can't ignore that reality. I mean, people all day long on Twitter can praise Jodie and Chibnall and how brilliant this episode was and how it brought in the Mobius Doctors. Great, fantastic, but the numbers speak for themselves, and Doctor Who's bleeding. It's dying. It's just the reality. And it's sad because it didn't have to be like this, because as real Doctor Who fans know, this show has always been about bringing people together from all walks of life. It was always very, very inclusive. It doesn't really feel as inclusive anymore, which is kind of weird. It feels more divisive these days. But there's always a hope that maybe there'll be a change, and maybe BBC will get their act together. I think a few people at the BBC, a few suits, a few executives that are continuing to support the direction that Doctor Who has gone, I think they need to go. And I think maybe that's part of the problem. Not just Chibnall, not just Jodie, not just the writers, but it goes all the way to the top of the BBC. But I feel like that's probably not going to happen. Maybe not till the 14th series, if we even get a 14th series. Or maybe we'll have to wait a decade. Because maybe that's the best thing to happen to Doctor Who is, give it a little break. If they ever decide to bring it back. In the words of Columbo, there's just one more thing. How the fuck did the Judoon beam inside the TARDIS and then beam the Doctor outside of the TARDIS into a prison? Like, you're not supposed to be able to do that. It's the TARDIS. Nothing's supposed to be able to get inside the TARDIS unless through the door, if the door actually happens to be open. Now, I know there's a few instances where that has happened with the Dream Master and one of those celestial beings throughout Series 12. But typical beaming, I just don't see that. I mean, I know. One of many examples of Chibnall not giving a shit about Doctor Who lore or canon. And you know what? I think this is a good way to end Jodie's era. I know that's not going to happen, but just sentence her to that rock prison for the rest of her life. Well, this life. And then we skip ahead where she's old and gray. And just like, William Hartnell's Doctor, she just, as she's dying, finally, sitting in a prison cell for I don't know how many hundreds of years before she finally succumbs. Then she regenerates into Jo Martin's Doctor, and then all of a sudden she figures out a clever way to get herself out of prison, and she gets back to the TARDIS, and then she finds a new companion, and then I think that would be a nice way to say goodbye to Jodie's Doctor. But anyways, that's my overall thoughts, views, and opinions about a lot of things, I guess. The series finale of Series 12 of Doctor Who. My thoughts specifically about the Jodie Chibnall era, like ERROR, error of Doctor Who. My hopes that it will eventually get better under a new showrunner, new writers that actually give a damn about sci-fi and Doctor Who lore and canon. I think that a smart enough writer or team of writers could undo all this and somehow save the Time Lords. Maybe it was all ruse by the Master and all a trick. I mean, they could go that angle. It was just to break the Doctor. And then the Cyber Masters, or the Time Cyber people, or whatever the Master created, that was dumb too. Yeah, dumb. But I think I'm done with my review. Sorry I rambled on for a little bit. But at the same time, I would like to know anyone's opinions about the Jodie Chibnall era of Doctor Who. Not just the series finale, but the past 2 seasons as well. And if you don't want to talk about that, if you want to be more positive, let me know some of your favorite Doctors. Like new Doctor, classic Doctors. Feel free. And fill me with some of your takes, some of your favorite episodes, favorite companions, favorite Doctors below in the comments section.